Everything you need to know about products and services that can improve your life. This is Experts on Call on CL 650.
Shake, rattle, and roll. Shake, rattle, and roll.
Oh, how appropriate. We're back. This is Experts on Call on CL 650. I'm Joanne Sutton. Thanks for joining us today. We are talking about insurance, and joining us in the studio are resident experts. We have from IntactInsurance, Patrick Magnuson and Keith Story, along with Andrew Tablotny of Laguerre Pelling Insurance from Richmond. Now, why that song is so appropriate, because we are talking about insurance, and in particular right now, earthquake insurance, and it's something very unique to us here on the West Coast. I know a lot of Canada doesn't have the same concerns that we do living here in beautiful British Columbia. So let's start by setting the scene for the topic today, and the sobering thought that it's really not a matter of if we're going to get the big one. It's basically come down to when. Science has proven that we're going to get hit.
30% chance of in the next 50 years there'll be a major quake either here or in Quebec, and if God forbid it's in Quebec, because the take-up of insurance there is non-existent.
And if it happened here?
Upwards of $75 billion as the estimated fallout.
$75 billion.
Mm-hmm.
If it happens here in like Vancouver or anywhere in the province.
In
the coast, yeah.
Wow.
Major hub for ships and whatnot to bring goods to the country.
Right. So let's talk about the reality of living here in this earthquake zone. It's considered a very high risk zone, and what's going to happen? What should we do? How can we be prepared for this? And where does insurance fit into this picture?
Well, I think the first thing you want to do is be prepared. Have a plan at the house and be prepared for up to 72 hours at the very minimum.
I tell my clients be prepared for a week.
A week. I think that's great advice.
You look at what's happened around the world, and people aren't they're on their own for far longer than 72 hours.
Yeah. And consider if you have medical needs. For example, if you're a diabetic, make sure that wherever you are, you have insulin supplies with you.
Or whatever medication you may be taking.
If you have asthmatic, I mean, there may be a lot of dust in the air if buildings have collapsed or whatever. So, I mean, asthma is going to be likely an issue. So make sure you have your inhalers and say all medicines that you need.
So that's part of being prepared, yeah.
And water.
Oh, yeah.
You live without food, but you need water. So.
Yeah.
So how much water should we be stacking away for a week? Is that a liter a day per person, or do you have an estimate, or what do you tell your clients?
Well, I mean, what are you supposed to drink? You're supposed to drink,
10 glasses a day, 6 to 8 or whatever.
Yeah, so.
Better to have way too much than not enough.
Yeah. But if you are stockpiling and not hoarding so much, but if you're stockpiling water, I mean, make sure that you are refreshing it every year or so. I mean, it does have a finite lifespan at some point.
There's ways to if you buy the right kind of bleach, you can take if you get water that's contaminated, you can use bleach and use that to
certainly
to come up with water. So.
And we're all very outdoorsy people here on the coast, and anybody who's done any camping or hiking in the bush, like there's
iodine tablets and stuff.
Tablets that you can buy to purify water. So these are all great ideas, guys. So now that we know how real this conversation is and should be, let's continue with the specifics about actual earthquake insurance and preparedness. Like, how does earthquake insurance work?
Well, to start, and let's be clear, your basic homeowner's policy does not provide coverage for earthquake.
It does not?
It does not.
Okay, it's something separate.
That's right. You have to buy a specific endorsement on your homeowner's policy or on your condo policy or your tenant's policy that will provide you that earthquake coverage.
And does every company offer earthquake insurance?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, unlike when we were talking about earlier a little about the overland water, not every company has that, and that's fairly new. But earthquake is fairly standard. And Andrew, correct me if I'm wrong, but as far as I'm concerned,
you're wrong.
Okay, well,
it depends. I mean, again, as I say, I'm a dinosaur. I've been around for years, but I remember back in the '90s when there was after the San Francisco earthquakes, that insurance companies in Richmond refused to sell insurance for new policies. Yeah. There were some companies that would not sell any earthquake coverage.
Yeah. But certainly today,
there's more reinsurance out there, and the companies are a little more pragmatic about it now.
Absolutely. Yes, you'll be able to buy insurance. I mean, you'll be able to get insurance for earthquake, and if you can't, then you speak to your broker, and you'll find someone who they'll be able to find you somebody who will sell you earthquake insurance.
And then it also depends on the type you buy as well, because some companies are capping the amount that they'll pay out after an earthquake. because what they're trying to do is the insurance companies buy reinsurance, which is a term meaning that they're buying insurance for their insurance. And so to quantify their exposure because with guaranteed replacement costs means we will pay whatever it costs to rebuild. Well, in the event of an earthquake, that number is going to go up 20 or 30 or maybe even 40% in the event of a huge catastrophe. Statistics show that and prove that out. When you have a major catastrophe, the Kelowna fires are a perfect example. A piece of plywood one day was $25. It was $60 the next day.
That's right.
Yeah. That's supply and demand and availability of resources and labor. But basically the way earthquake insurance works is you buy. It's like a regular policy. So if you insure your home for say $500,000, you're going to insure your home for $500,000 under the earthquake. And then you can have your contents as well. And Intact provides the option of not insuring your contents if you don't want to, but most people buy it. And then the deductible is a percentage of that amount of insurance. And that might be where, depending where you are and what your exposure is, what your deductible is probably going to be where you find the difference in the availability of coverage.
So you mentioned guaranteed replacement costs. How is all that calculated?
Well, that's through basically a building calculator. And when you go to your broker and you determine what your amount of insurance is going to be, they use a tool, and there's a number of different companies that have tools that are developed, and these are all independent third-party companies. There's no insurer bias or anything like that, but basically they assess what it would cost to rebuild your home with one of a similar one after a loss. And they're constantly updating based off of current prices. The current price of lumber, the current price of wiring and copper, and the rest of it. And they're also going to include things like debris removal and, of course, the contractor's overhead and profit. So all that factors in, and that will determine what it would cost to rebuild your home. That's not how much it would cost to buy your home or to sell your home, and it does not include the cost of land. It's strictly the cost to rebuild your home.
The framework, essentially.
Yeah, right. But it
doesn't even cover the contents.
You really need to make sure that you're describing, when you visit your broker, to make sure you describe the property exactly as accurately as possible, to make sure that the evaluation tool is going to be accurate.
The one point I want to bring forward is that I get people coming and saying, well, I just finished building my house and it only cost me $137 a square foot. Unfortunately, when you're dealing with an insurance claim, it's going to be 20 to 30% higher on that building value. So when you come in and say, well, I just built it for $500,000, my calculator is probably going to come up at $600,000 or $650,000 for the same house, because you're looking at a lot of variables that affect it. One example would be if you build a house between two houses. Now they got to go in and tear this house down because it's been gutted by a fire. Well, now they've got to take extra measures to make sure the house doesn't collapse on the house next door. You've got gardens in front. Well, when your house was first built, when you first built it, you just came in, you dumped all the lumber, and you were able to build.
Sure, it was raw land. It wasn't a garden.
Right. So there's all kinds of extra measures that have to be taken that compound the cost. On top of that, you don't want to take 10, 12, or 14 months to build your house, which you did before, because you're waiting for the plumber for a month because he's giving you a screaming deal. You want it built in 6 or 8 months so that you're back into the house as quickly as possible. So when you have to expedite it, you're paying extra costs for all of these trades to be able to make sure the place is built quickly and efficiently.
Well, this is all great if you own your own home. What kind of implications are there if there's an earthquake and you're in a condo or a strata situation?
What? Yeah.
That's probably layers and layers and layers. Can you simplip that in any way,
for sure,
Andrew or Patrick? Go ahead.
Well, I think when you talk about condos, most people think that, I'm just insuring my contents. In a lot of cases that is the case, but when it comes to earthquake, it's a very different animal, because it's not just the contents that you're covering. Really, what you're protecting yourself against is the special assessments from the condo corporation's earthquake policy and their earthquake deductible. So if you think that to rebuild your entire building is going to be $10 million, and if they have a 10% deductible,
let's try 80 million.
All right, so let's say it's $80 million, and if they have a 10% deductible, well, that's $8 million that they're going to assess back to the unit owners.
Wow.
So you're going to be responsible for your portion of that. So that part of it is almost more than the contents piece. Plus the additional living expense. It's not like a home, like Andrew was just saying, you're going to get back into that in 6 to 8 months because they're going to be able to rebuild your home like that. Now they have to rebuild an $80 million condo building. It's going to take an awful long time, and you're going to be out of that place for quite a while.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, Christchurch is a perfect example. That's 5-6 years ago now. I was at a symposium about a year ago, and the fellow came up from there, and he said it was going to be 6 to 8 years for all the homes to be rebuilt, and they're looking at 10 to 15 years for the commercial buildings. And
Wow.
I would classify condominiums as a commercial building. So, essentially you're not going to be back in your condo in any time soon. So, and one thing we'll bring forward on Intact's condo policy, they include $25,000 for earthquake deductible coverage. A lot of the companies only give you $1,000, $1,500, or $2,500 for that coverage. So something to be aware of. Their policy tends to be a little bit more, but there's a lot more bells and whistles on it. And I just I just recently sold my house and I bought another house, and I could have easily bought a condo, but I look at the potential for having to deal with this if we ever have the major earthquake, and it just scares the bejesus out of me what's going to happen.
Yeah, you've just scared the bejesus out of us and then half the listeners too right now. Thanks, Andrew. Okay, what can we do as homeowners to help prevent any possible damage resulting from an earthquake? Like, can we be more prepared in our homes?
Well, I think you have to look around your house and say, if everything is shaking, what am I exposed to? And at that point, it's almost like preventing damage. It's also preventing injury.
Yeah.
I had a friend, and she had an IKEA shelf, and she was standing on a chair, and she was dusting in the top of it.
Sure.
And she slipped off the chair, grabbed the shelf, and the shelf fell on top of her.
Yeah.
And she got a little bit hurt. But what I was thinking is, well, she also lives in Vancouver, and so
that'd be the first thing to come down.
Exactly. It was an anchor to the wall. And I mean, in IKEA, they give you those little anchors to anchor everything to the wall, right? So, I mean, so if you don't anchor the stuff well, it's going to fall down. It's going to fall down on you, your kids.
Okay.
It may block egresses and exits and places that you can get out of. So now you're going to be trapped. So I think that's important to do. If you have an older home, you can look into doing some earthquake retrofitting. It's not cheap, but
what is that?
it sort of talks about. I'm not an expert on it for sure, but it's they install some crib walls. They do some things with the foundation. Basically, try to get your older home up to some of the newer earthquake codes. And again, just to sort of prevent that
creating a little more
loss.
Stability in an older home that may have shifted over time.
That's right.
Well, a lot of the older homes weren't strapped down to the foundation.
That's right.
They're just built on, attached, nailed down a bit, and
Very rigid.
Yeah. So in the event of an earthquake, the house may not really collapse. What'll happen is it'll fall off the foundation and just sort of teeter to one side. And how do you put that back?
You don't. You rebuild the whole home.
Right. That's something you could do.
And the one thing I think is important is that it's preparedness. We talked a little bit earlier about fire, and think through Smokey the Bear and through all the fire drills we've had, and it's been ingrained in us ever since we're kids. Fire is this, fire. How do we get out in the event of a fire? Earthquake is, people are much more complacent about it. They're not really prepared for it. We've seen devastating events in recent years, and in places like Christchurch that Andrew was talking about that are, they're modern first world countries with proper building codes, and they're still being devastated. So, I think it's important to be prepared. It's important to know what to do when something happens. That whole drop, cover, and hold on from the great BC earthquake shakeout.
Yep.
I mean, that's to me is this is as important as the fire drills, and it's something that we need to be prepared of.
So they're teaching the kids this in school. The kids need to come home and teach us as adults.
That's
because
right.
it wasn't part of our growing up. It wasn't part of our society. Learning what to do in an earthquake.
If you want information on accessing government websites or lists of things to do, if you go to my website on my website, I've got everything there. I've got a huge amount of information on earthquake. It's legearpelling.com, LEGEARPELLING.com. There's lists of things to do, what to do, who to contact. I've got the local, for Richmond residents, there's the local government, how to contact them, and a wealth of information is there. So.
Is earthquake insurance a popular item in British Columbia?
It is. It's certainly much more popular in sort of the area where we're exposed. If you compare it to places like California, we have a much higher take-up than they do. We referenced earlier about Quebec, and we have a much higher take-up than they do in Quebec. But not everybody has it. I think a lot of people have the assumption that, it's a disaster, the government will take care of me. They won't. Earthquake insurance is relatively affordable. It is accessible. So that kind of event is not going to qualify for disaster relief funding. So you'll be on your own.
Thanks, Patrick. Everything insurance today. You're listening to Experts on Call on CL650. I'm Joanne Sutton, and joining us in the studio are resident insurance experts. We have Patrick Magnuson and Keith Story, both from Intact Insurance, along with Andrew Dublotny of Legear-Pelling Insurance here in Richmond. For more information, yes, Andrew just gave you his website. You can also go to intact.ca. So today's conversation, Basically, a little bit about an Insurance 101 covering topics from basic needs to earthquake insurance, and we're about to touch base on auto insurance. That's next on CL 650.
This is Experts on Call on CL 650.